It's the Awake Space with Laurie Rivers. And this week we're talking about using our creativity as an act of rebellion and an act of self empowerment. Because I'm not going to lie, it's a very spicy week. And if you want to know what's up in the headlines and get a heads up ahead of that, then you need to head over to the Patreon. There's just a lot of changing tide energy, but that doesn't mean things resolve right away. And it doesn't mean we get the endings we're hoping for the way we want them. And I'm really going to suggest this week you let go of outcomes and you learn to just kind of roll with things. I know it's hard. It's hard everywhere. It's hard here too. Okay. As we move into the next stage of massive systemic change. This is something I've been talking about for years, and people used to call me a fearmonger. Good times. Change is inevitable. How we deal with it is up to us. And I asked the Awake Space community members if there was anything they wanted me to cover because I know that energy is a spicy meatball right now. And so I've got some great feedback from the members of the community about this very topic because creativity isn't just art or dancing or writing. Creativity is how we take the wellspring of our energy and put it out into the world, whether we're doodling or gardening or baking or arranging a room. That is using your creative energy. And we're going to talk about that for this week's episode because we all need a way to put our hands into action, a way to stop focusing on the things that are outside of our control because we do need to pull our energy back to center. That's something else I'm going to cover because somebody asked, what's the difference between grounding and centering? And I think that's a great thing to talk about. We're going to talk about that first and why it relates to our creative energy. Notice I'm always pointing to the heart center when I say center. Grounding is down at your feet. And so in the next segment, that's what I'm going to be talking about. And as always, we're going to do the what's in the headlines for the patrons, but I will cover a little bit about what I expect to see this week. And if anybody calls me a fearmonger, you have no idea how I sit with information and try to make it as useful and as practical as possible without scaring the bejesus out of you. So deep breaths, get your tea, get your coffee, get your matcha, get your Red Bull, get your H2O. And whether we're going to work, taking the kids to school, out in the garden, taking the cat in the backpack in the park, taking the doggy for a walk, going to the gym, or folding laundry, we're going to do it together. I don't think it's it this month, but you can start getting your hopes up. Over the weekend, a lot of people were feeling uneasy. And there's a lot of reasons to feel uneasy when you're looking out in the world, and social media is full of people speaking with their whole chests, and some of them know what they're talking about. And we are looking at a very unstable moment in time. As I record this, the moon in Taurus is moving to conjunct Uranus, which isn't having any other planetary aspects at the moment. At the moment. Next week, we look at Mars moving into a sextile with it, but right now it's kind of the cheese standing alone. And that means that energy we feel, it's going to have a release early Monday morning, probably before I get the podcast out. So there could be significant events. And we human beings are very sensitive. And remember, I always say we're transmitters as much as we're receivers. However, learning how to be a transmitter is something that takes time and practice. That's why people suggest meditation. That's why people have physical activities that they do to move the energy out. And one of the greatest things we can do is be creative. So for me, I go into community. I put my life force into community. That's one place it gets fueled. And then recording the podcast is an act of expressing creative energy. You'd be like, that's great for you, Laurie. What about me? So when it comes to using our creative energy, understand that it is a true act of rebellion. It is looking at the maelstrom happening out in the world, looking at the shit show it is, and saying, I refuse to let the conditioning I have of being small and unseen take priority. I refuse to be cowed into submission in this time of massive systemic change. I refuse to be manipulated. I refuse to be silenced. Now, I'm not talking about getting on social media and giving people a piece of your mind because that might feel good for 2 seconds. But when we can work the collywobbles out, when we can work that anxiety out, that depression out, and I'm not saying it's a cure all at all. You guys know me. But when we have these big, big moments in time, and this week we have more than one big moment in time. Like as we move to the 1st of April with a full moon, no April Fools there. We're watching this energy build, and it will be very easy to be short tempered. It will be very easy to be on edge, want to put the covers up over our heads. And that is how we become defeated human beings. There are a lot of academic practices, and I'm going to address kind of a question they put because they are being taught that systems impact all of us and therefore we can't avoid it. And on one hand, that is true. And yet, there are ways to work within that to build small systems, both within ourselves and in the outer world to some degree. We're not going to be able to change the big picture stuff, and we're not going to solve all of the isms in the world, but we can definitely work on our immediate arena, our immediate area, our home, our family, where we move through the world with as much power as we have. And some people have more and some people have less. One is not better than the other. Before I get into using your creative energy, your sun, your creative life force, we're going to talk about centering versus grounding. So I've been saying for quite some time, you're not going to be able to ground right now. You're just not. It's not going to be lasting. You might get it for a few seconds and then you're going to blame yourself and wonder what the hell is wrong with me. Nothing is wrong with you. Okay. Nothing. The energy is not about grounding right now because we're in the next phase of massive systemic change. And this massive systemic, it's not like a 4-phase process. It's going to be continuing over time. Okay. It just is. The dynamics in the world and how we do things, they are all changing. And you're not doing anything wrong. And I'm going to repeat myself. You are not doing anything wrong. Energetically, emotionally, physically. No matter what happens, you didn't invite this into your life. You didn't make it happen. We are collectively going through one of the greatest changes in human history since the end of the Bronze Age. And that's huge. And it's a really big concept and it's hard. I have a hard time wrapping my head around it. Okay. And I've been looking at it for years. So grounding isn't really going to happen because it's not time to ground. There's nothing to ground to. We center. And notice I always point to the heart space because the center is here and it would be down your torso. So the heart center, all of this front and back is here. And then we have our solar plexus. If we center, we calm the solar plexus. Okay. And everybody's solar plexus is probably out of whack right now, overstimulated, understimulated, because that's where our gut instincts are. That's our, oh shit's about to hit the fan, right? Or there's nothing I can do. We'll feel that there. If we can come to center, we give all of our systems, all of our energy centers, but also the minor energy centers throughout the body, including the hands and feet, etc., the eyes, etc. It's a little wild right now. So coming to center is a constant practice. Notice how I'm bringing my hands in. And I know I popped a nail. And I popped a nail right before I recorded, damn it. But guess what? We're rolling anyway. We're going to bring ourselves back to center. I have meditations for patrons at the $5 level and up. Things to help reduce anxiety, like calm the solar plexus. Things that help us envision a pathway forward. Things that help us just bring ease and let go of the tension. Because worry is a misuse of imagination, especially in times of unique stress and strain. Because let's say all hell breaks loose, and I'm not saying it will, but let's say all hell breaks loose. Being able to tune in to possibility helps you find solutions. That's how your brain works. If you're in the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode, then you can actually be a hindrance more than a help to the people around you. Panic does not help. Panic causes problems. And it's easy to be panicked, even in, if you're in a dangerous situation. Panic is quick because it's a survival instinct. But if you have a lot of people panicking at the same time, it's chaos and it does not serve longevity for everybody around us. So we want to learn how to recognize and turn our attention to what can be done. Sometimes it's not a lot, but there's still something that can be done until there isn't. Learning how to come to center is very, very important. And again, I have meditations in the community, but here on the podcast, let me just give you a quick tip on coming to center. So when you're feeling frazzled, your energy is frenetic, you're kind of all over the place, you're irritable, you're cranky, you're kind of spinning out on what might happen and what the problems are around. And other people are cranky and irritable because the energy, you can cut it with a knife right now. One of the things you can do is take a moment to yourself if you can. If you have to go to the bathroom and lock the door, hard if you have toddlers, but I wouldn't leave them outside. But I always say children are our mastery partners because we have to learn how to function with them. Not always helping with the concentration, right? One, breathing. Number one, check it. When you're frenetic, ask yourself the question, how is my breathing? And then check your shoulders. They're a little high. Let's bring them down. Let's relax the jaw. And you can breathe with the kids. You can make it a game. Okay, we're going to do belly breaths now. And we're going to breathe in through our nose. And if they don't, it's fine. They can breathe through their mouth. If they've got goobers, it's okay to go. Okay, because if you're shallow up here, you're feeding your amygdala, you're feeding the panic, you're feeding the adrenaline, you're feeding the cortisol. We want to take it slow. We want to shake out if you can. Okay, shake out the body, get the tension patterns relaxed. And then we're going to take a deep breath in through the nose if you can. Through your mouth is fine if you can't. And we're going to take a deep breath in. Make sure that belly is nice and full. Imagine an inner tube being filled up. And then we're going to exhale as slow as we can. The first one might be a lot like, it might be like that. And that's okay. You might have a little primal moment. Do it again. Then relax. Then breathe out again. It might take 5 more times. Make it a game if you have little ones. Make it a game. Because if you're tense and anxious, they're picking up on it. Okay, and that's not a blame thing. But if you're wondering why, like, I'm in a mood, my kids are in a mood, emotions are contagious. Stanford University proved that, okay, in a study. You can look it up. So if you want them to be a little calmer, learning to calm yourself and moving that energy through. Now, if they have an earache or a tummy ache or they don't feel good, then yeah, they're going to be crying and agitated because that's how they get their needs met. The problem is we didn't learn skills to get our needs met as we got older into the latency years, the 9 to 12 until individuation around 13, 14. And everybody talks about self-regulating. Children are not designed to self-regulate. Children look to their parents for regulation. That is part of how human beings are designed, and we learn to regulate together. We can co-regulate. All right. I'm not saying it's one thing to have really clingy, right? It's another thing to understand. We are always co regulating all the time. We do it in community as well, especially in the awake space. I felt the quiet, and the quiet was tense, and I was feeling a certain way myself. So I went into our awake space lounge. I'm like, hey, the energy's pretty gritty right now. How's everybody doing? And listen to what was going on with people. And then I said, I'm covering this topic on the podcast, but is there anything you guys want me to talk about? And talking about centering versus grounding was one of those. So centering is just coming back into yourself so that your energy isn't scattershotted all over the place. It's just that feeling of I'm here, I'm whole, I'm integrated. I'm here, I'm whole, I'm integrated. Grounding is more of an anchor point, and we just don't get to anchor into much right now. So we're wanting to come into ourselves, and centering is honestly a more powerful thing to do in general. So this is great practice. And again, if you have little ones, you can do it with them. If your animals have been acting up, notice how their behavior changes. I was restless about 2 hours ago, and so was Malcolm, my dog. Once I started practicing what I preach, he simmered down because my energy wasn't spiky and on edge. So let's take a look a little bit at what everybody asked for in the awake space. And we may, as you listen to this, there may be news that comes out right around the time this podcast is published. I wish I could tell you, but it involves Uranus. So it's, it could be storms, it could be tornadoes, it could be lightning, it could be some really big bombings in the Middle East, it could be more interesting economic news. And all of that just is kind of an assault on our nervous system. That's why I decided to do an episode to empower you, to give you some skills and tools, and to show the power of community because I knew what I was going to talk about. I didn't have to reach out, but I thought, let me just ask what people need right now. And with Uranus and Taurus, our needs kind of get disrupted a little bit, or it might be harder to know what we need because the world is changing and we may have been raised to believe we needed something and it isn't really authentic to who we are. And we may not know how to know what we want. And so this is kind of disrupting it, especially if you followed the rules and did everything you were supposed to do. And now that reality is being shaken apart. And so how do you know what you want? And should you even try? Right. And that's why we're looking at the power of creativity today. So first we're going to come to center because our creative energy comes out from here, right? Our creative energy just exudes out from the heart center because it's an expression of our self. Okay, it's our spirit versus our soul. It's our spirit. It's the thing that animates us. It doesn't mean you have to be an artist in a traditional sense. It doesn't mean you have to be a singer or a dancer or a writer. It could be how you arrange your fridge. It could be how you grocery shop. It could be how you put yourself out there in the world. We need kindness. We need practical solutions to everyday problems. And anybody can see a problem. All those futurists that people say, oh, they're geniuses. I beg to differ. I beg to differ that looking at problems makes you a genius. A genius finds solutions. Anybody can see the problem. How to solve the problem takes a real genius, and each one of us has unique genius. It's not just about the IQ number that measures verbal and mathematical intelligence. There's so many more ways to be intelligent. Recently, because of my eyes, I'm not great at housekeeping. By the time I see a dust bunny, there's a whole colony and they have names. Okay. Very, very visually impaired. And my mother is going to be 79 this year. And she's getting tired. And I'm not, even when I try to help, she follows behind me. So it took a while because we live very rurally that I found a housekeeping service to help out. The person who came over, and because my parents are coming home this week and I wanted it nice and tidy for when they got home, dusted and vacuumed. And sure enough, man, when I saw the dust, I was like, oh, man, I didn't even notice because I can't see it. But this person could. They were amazing at what they did, very artful in how they approached it. They had a whole system. They knew exactly what they were doing, and it was really, really beautiful. How we do everything comes from here. And when we unlock ourselves authentically, we are able to make more of an impact. But we have to know that in ourselves too, to actually recognize that in ourselves. So let's take a look at what patrons asked me. So the members, so patrons is just short form for members because we're on Patreon. That's where our community, the Awake Space, is. Remember, we're 100% listener supported, and without them, there is no podcast. So make sure you thank them in the comments on YouTube or Spotify or wherever comments are for the podcast. So somebody asked, you've been talking about stocking up for years, and I have. I haven't mentioned it as much because, to be honest, the time for warnings is over. I gave my warnings and guidance let me know time for warnings is over. You've given the message. Now you're teaching tools to deal with the moment. So I am very guidance led. All right. As much as I believe in practical, rational solutions, I am very connected to my guidance. And guidance was like, you're done with warnings. It's just that time is over. Doesn't mean it's too late to prepare. But I talked about it and talked about it and talked about it for years. So to recap, it is necessary to keep your pantry full of the things you need. Somebody asked for specifics, and I'm like, everybody has different needs. If you have a gluten-free diet, then you need to make sure you take care of what you need. I wouldn't blow all my money. I wouldn't spend thousands of dollars on it, but I would definitely make sure the pantry stays stocked of the things you eat with regularity. And these are non-perishable goods, canned goods, dried goods. I would learn, if you don't already know how to cook, I think the pandemic helped us out with that one because a lot of people did learn how. But I would learn how to use lentils, beans, barley. I think grains will be very expensive as we go into the fall. So I'd make sure I'd have my pasta, my wheat products, if you do that, barley, legumes of all kinds. So your lentils, your dried beans, kidney beans, black beans. Get what you can. Okay. And you can store these in glass jars. So if you have old like pasta sauce jars or anything that comes in a glass jar, you don't have to buy a bunch of things. You can reuse the jars like your grandma did. That's a great way to repurpose things instead of put it in a landfill. Any kind of supplies that you use, crafting supplies, art supplies, anything for the kids, dogs, gardening supplies. You really want to get your gardening supplies. Learning, if you're gardening inside, you probably don't want to use compost. But if you are gardening on a balcony, or you're learning how to make a compost bin that's done properly. Compost doesn't stink when it's done right. Okay. But you could also, like my mom and dad, they just toss the wet garbage, the just food and not meat products, but eggshells, vegetables, things that break down quickly. And then my dad rototills it in because he built that garden patch up over time because there was really bad soil where they live. And so we just build up where we're growing and decide what we're growing and do that. You can have hydroponics. I would really focus on growing your own leafy greens. They're very, very easy to grow. They're nutritious, not just, iceberg lettuce, but you can grow arugula, spinach, watercress, herbs. You can grow in an herb garden. Those are all fairly simple to grow. It's not just about doing it for the nutritional value. It is also to give yourself something creative. And for all the people who say, well, I can't garden. Well, you can. It's just you have to learn how. It's a skill where nobody's born gardening. And in fact, we're going to be doing the astrology of gardening on the 29th. I'm very excited. It was my daughter's request. It's only $20. I'll put the link in the show notes. And we'll talk about how to use moon phases and when to plant things using the moon and how to garden a little more successfully when we take a look at what's going on with the sky. It's one of the oldest forms of astrology is using astrology for agriculture or gardening. So we'll talk a little bit about the history and we'll give some tips and hints and that will help. I've gardened for years and years and years. I had a beautiful garden while my children were growing up. Everything was edible from the herbs to the flowers to the vegetables and the fruit and berries. I never wanted my kids to, grab something poisonous because they were really little. Made sure everything was edible and we made fairy salads. What's a fairy salad? When you use edible flowers and mint and the things they liked, but whether it was violets or carnations or pinks or calendula, those are all edible flowers. So we'll have a little list, a little ebook, a little teeny tiny guide that'll give you ideas and help you garden with more effectiveness. A victory garden doesn't have to be very big, and it is a creative endeavor. It's something you learn from. I find that when people make mistakes anymore or something doesn't work the way they had it planned out in their head, they just give up on things. And guys, the one thing you can't afford to do as we move forward is be defeatist. You're learning. It's just information. Like, well, that didn't work. Try again. That's the most important skill you can cultivate going forward is that didn't work. What can I do next? That's that on creativity as well as making sure your needs are met as much as you can. If you need to get your medications refilled, that one gets to be a little bit less in our hands than we can control the food we have around us. But make sure you're in good communication with your pharmacist. I don't see huge breaches of that particular supply chain too much, especially in the United States. But I do think we're going to see some issues with food, whether it's because it can't be delivered due to rising fuel costs or issues around fertilizer. We've all heard about that because of the different chemicals. Industrial farming is going to be impacted. It doesn't mean you can't garden or support local smaller farms. And you can do that by joining a CSA as much as you can through gardening. That's one of the many ways you can help prepare yourself. I thought that was a great question. I mean, everybody's were great. They kind of all, there's different categories, but lots of things happening. Like I said, this week is going to be crunchy. And somebody was asking about protection, shields of protection. The old pink bubble routine, the white light bubble routine. I like to have like a bug zapper around me. And it's really funny because I think people think it's like really close in, but mine's probably a good 3-4 feet out of me, if not wider. And again, you imagine these things. Imagination is your greatest tool. But you have to know it works. You can't just like visualize and go, I hope it works. Because it's energy. So you damn well better know it's working and look for evidence that it's working. Be like, all right, I know it's working and I look forward to the evidence. That's how you want to think about shields. You can cloak yourself. I'm only visible to people who have the best intentions towards me and meet my idea of my wellness. Because some people have really good intentions, but it doesn't match up with what you decide is good for you. I have another one. It's almost like a screen, and this has been active since 1999, and it's been the only thing that comes through my guidance first. It's filtered, so nothing comes to me that hasn't been filtered by guidance. So things get transmuted before they get to me. So even if I'm agitated, I know there's no great harm. It's just my instinctual self picking up on what's going on in the physical world that has my instincts up of like, there could be some interesting things. But at the same time, I know I'm okay. I know I personally am okay. I know the people I care about will be as okay as possible. But as far as energy coming directly at, nothing comes to me that does not serve me and isn't filtered through love. When I did the check-in with members of the Awake Space, people talked about having headaches. People talked about just feeling generally physically, but I'm going to say mundane over magic. Always get it checked out. However, reminding you if you can get in the shower, get in a tub and work to let that energy go down the drain. So if you're feeling a lot, being as physically active as possible, taking a walk, if that works for you. If the weather is decent, getting out in the garden, pulling weeds, preparing the soil, starting seeds, getting your hands in the dirt if you can. It's a good way to discharge energy. Don't worry about Mama Earth. She can handle it. Baking, if you can. Like if you don't have good weather outside and you can bake or cook, make food that feels good to you and nurturing. Make sure you're taking your supplements properly, your vitamins and your minerals. I'll talk about that in a second. Notice no brace on my hand. I was talking about it in a live stream at the Awake Space, but boy, did I find out something very fascinating. I didn't know. And so there's definitely healing going on. I still have a little bit of soreness here, but that's because I did something stupid a couple of weeks ago. It's not the tendons. Super fun. No, it's not carpal tunnel. I was a dummy. I'll tell you about it later. Something to look forward to. Anyway, we're going to do some patron shout outs and then we're going to talk about creativity as rebellion as we go along. Like I said, it doesn't have to be the arts, it doesn't have to be huge. It is something to move your energy and give you some buoyancy. I don't think it's it this month, but you can start getting your hopes up. Without the community of the Awake Space, there would be no podcast. And I like to say, without you, there is no me. So thank you for letting me be of service. This week, coming up on March 29th, we are doing the Astrology of Gardening, and it's $20. It's going to be a good time. I've got a really pretty graphic for the book cover, and it's a small little pamphlet. So it's going to be a really great guide. Things don't have to be big to be impactful. And that's what we're talking about this week here on the Awake Space podcast. We are looking at how to take small bursts of creativity to re-empower ourselves and reinvigorate ourselves. And so that's what the podcast is going to be about for people of the Awake Space. So we've got Christy, Zen, Jenny, Black Cat, Caitlin, Kate OC, BMP, Sarah, Chantel Z, Shipley Sugar News, Mochi Cat, Niv, 759DP, Frey, Nolani, Nat K, Heather, Birdie Nestor, Kristen, Jared, No Way Jose, Autumn, Jordan, Melissa, Ella, Jewel Sphere, Amber, Shania or Shinya, J Mintz, Jackie, Leah, Jillian, and C. That's different people. Yo-Yo, Peppermint, Jazz, Olga, Amanda, Alina, Ariana, Lupa, Kelly, Jen, Mark, Sarah, Hannah, and Megumi, Melissa, Gray, LP, Becca, and Jenny. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you. I see some old faces returning. That's the great thing about the Awake Space. You can come, you can go, you can come back. And we're always excited to have you in community. Community is what keeps things going. And what have I said? We need community going forward. And I've talked about that for a long time. In fact, as long as most of you have been listening to me, the importance of community and understanding the role community plays in our lives. And that is also something that can be very creative. So let's get on with things. Let's talk about creativity as an act of rebellion, creativity as an act of empowerment, and why you're not being selfish, okay? I don't think it's it this month, but you can start getting your hopes up. So let's talk about ways we can use creativity as a form of rebellion, as a way to come back to center, as a way to boost our energy levels if we're feeling overly tired, or if we are teetering on the edge, wondering if we're going to make it. Creativity takes all kinds of shapes and sizes. It isn't about being big and gaudy. It isn't about fine art or music or dance. It is how we express ourselves in the world. I talked a little bit about that earlier in the podcast. Things you can do, whether it is taking time to prepare your food mindfully, not just shoving it in the microwave or pulling something out of the freezer, but just taking the time to chop the vegetables methodically and slowly as you prepare things. If you're baking, enjoy the textural experience, okay? Don't just go through the motions. It's about mindfully putting ourselves in the moment. One of the ways I creatively express myself is putting myself into service. Okay, so when I feel akimbo, I love that word, akimbo, out of sorts, a little scattered, one of the things I do is I go into service in my community, the Awake Space. And you can almost guarantee when I pop in, I'm like, how's everybody doing? It's because I'm feeling it. And instead of sitting up in my head as a political analyst, especially one who specializes in the region in conflict right now, it is not a good time to have that speciality, let me tell you. I have to take a deep breath. You know, I also have family over there. I have people I care about. I have my oldest friend that I've known as in adulthood is over there. You know, so these are things I do. I take a breath, I go into community, and I communicate. Communication is part of how I express my creativity. Once I have myself centered, then I can write, I can work on the magazine, I can work on the booklet's almost done for the gardening class, and it's super cute and very pretty. These are things that you can put your focus on. So, one of the things about creativity is being able to pull your focus back and then doing things that fuel you. It could be playing a game. It could be designing something. It could be drawing out your garden plans. It could be getting your hands in the dirt. It could be drawing, sketching, doodling, doing Zentangles, crocheting, knitting, weaving, hand spinning, diamond painting. The list can go on and on. There isn't one particular way. It could be you need to physically move and shake it out. Some people love to dance. My mom, if she's super excited about something, she dances. If she's worried, she dances. She dances. She's Leo rising. She dances. She gets some moving. When she's not moving, things are serious, right? So if you want to know more about how to access your personal creativity, I'm going to be covering some of the things we see in the astrology chart that help you buoy yourself up by knowing that kind of activity might help me more. And we'll be talking about that in the patron only podcast this week. I had a lot of other questions that I think I will detail here. One, again, I think there are significant events that start the week off. I think this is a very Monday-ish Monday, a very Monday-ish Monday. And if you're wondering like why this is framed differently, because you don't see as much of my very pretty top, it's because I took a break, okay? Medium Matilda and I were talking about it because we viscerally felt sensations with this energy. Like I felt very nauseous. She felt shaky. Um, and we're both psychic. She's a medium. I'm not a medium. I'm an astrologer, and I don't really deliberately use being psychic in that. Okay, partly because I'm super sensitive and I try to keep my filters up because I don't want to feel everything. I already feel enough. I'm a Cancerian with a Cancer Mercury. So when I get those physical sensations, I know there's significant events. And it's fairly significant. We're going to see quite a bit of change as we move towards that full moon on April 1st, which is next Wednesday. Not this coming Wednesday, next Wednesday. It's not an April Fool's joke, and it's very dynamic energy. And of course, we'll talk about that on Monday's podcast. So I was asked a few things like, what about those energy lockdowns somebody was talking about on social media and is really picked up? And when I look at the April predictions I did for 2026, I said be prepared for rolling brownouts, blackouts. There could be issues with electricity. There could be events that cause rationing, and that would all be expected given world events. I would not plan long distance travel right now. I just wouldn't. Um, eh, Given the state of the world and given the state of the United States, I would be cautious if I had to travel. So this is from one of my members, and I didn't have permission to use her name, so I'm not going to use the name. I'm just going to read through this. To be honest, I would like to know how to use this energy to my advantage, so to speak. And we're definitely talking about that here on the podcast today, using that creativity to help shift us mentally and emotionally. She's talking about Hawaii and Nebraska and the TSA and ICE, and now I'm even more drained, but I'm trying not to be because, well, I can't be. I have kids that depend on me, but the energy is really impacting me. And yes, and so those are all external things. That's a lot of news, right? And when you're a compassionate, empathetic person, understanding that there's really sad things happening in the world, there's big problems, all right? I do want to remind you all that I say at the end of April, there could be a solution to a current world problem. And I wrote that back in May, June of 2025. No context. And a lot of what I was talking about out of context really has come to pass. I want us to have hope because things will resolve. They're not resolving this week. They're just not. Again, the tides are shifting. It takes time for a tide to shift. It takes time for the seasons to change. It takes time for an idea to become a real thing. It takes time from conception to birth. Takes time. Everything takes time. Nothing happens in an instant. And I would love to wave a magic wand and fix that, but I can't. Neither can you, but we can work on ourselves. We are the one thing we have control over. So I'm going to go more to this. So first of all, I would read through headlines judiciously. Be selective in what you're looking at news-wise. This is a long message, so I'm going through it in pieces. I want to use the macro level energy to my micro level advantage. I don't know if that makes sense. It makes total sense. That's what I talk about on the podcast all the time. When I give you a theme for the week, it's how to use the energy. It's how to use the current astrological transits. If I just sit there and talk astrology, you're going to get up in your head about the astrology. That's the one thing I've learned in the last 6 years is that if I give all the astrology instead of translating it into practical advice, this isn't just my opinions. I'm translating the astrology and how you can surf the cosmic tide. Every single episode is designed to help you for especially that week, but building skills upon skills to make it through these changing times. The change is not stopping anytime soon. Okay. Because every system is changing. And that means we have to change the systems within. And that goes to the second part of your commentary. And you know who you are. And I love you. You're bright and you're a person of service and you are sensitive and loving and kind and compassionate. And my goal, because it's such a good question or a good statement even, it helps other people. So, but I know you talk a lot about how we could have great days even when the world energy is impacted. I find it harder and harder to not be personally impacted day by day. That is completely understandable because, again, all the systems are changing. It impacts us. However, what's happening in Hawaii is not physically happening to you. We can have our attention on it. We can be aware of what we can do in a situation we have no control over. But again, it is not your present reality in where you live unless you live there. And that is not a selfish statement. It is being aware of what is directly impacting our physicality. There are other issues up on deck that do directly impact you. But when I say the world can be burning and you can still have a good day, I'm not kidding. And it's not just about mindset. Everybody has their own transits, right? Everybody has a natal chart and how the transits are moving around it, because you have the natal chart that's static and the transits move around it. Go look at my How to Find Transits if you don't know what I'm talking about, listeners. I'll put a link in the show notes. We all have our unique set of perceptions. That's a psychological fact. That's a neurological fact. Our astrology chart shows us the spectrum of how those perceptions operate. In my field, we discuss the systems at play on each other. And so even one's personal life is determined and impacted by the system. So understanding that system is important for personal movement and growth. Yes, and all the systems are going to change. So everybody's going to be discombobulated. Everything we think is normal, how we do our work in the world, how we buy our food, how we transport ourselves, how we govern ourselves, all of this for the foreseeable future is reshaping. What that ends up looking like is very dependent on the day-to-day actions of everyone in the collective. That's why I teach what I teach. Imagine seeing this time period coming almost 30 years ago. You know, it'll be 30, well, actually 96, I started being in, so it was 30 years ago. God. And seeing it coming out of context, just knowing everything would change. But it doesn't mean everything's going away. So we have to change the system within. So if we have in our personal system that we have certain narratives we say to ourselves over and over and over, the stories we tell ourselves, I'm change resistant. I can't handle this. I'm too weak. I'm not big enough. People are always against me. Some of that may be true, but just because it's true doesn't mean that has to be the driving force of your system. Okay. Well, I don't like change, but I know I can navigate it. That's a good way to change that. Yeah, there are people who are really out to get me, and I am able to make myself as safe as possible. That's one of the reasons I've designed the work, which is in Laurie's test lab. People in the mystery school and astrology crew have access to that. These are really, really short videos, but it's a very, very powerful process that requires action and practice. And my daughter, my co-visionary, and I are working on doing more in the test lab. Unfortunately, she got shingles. And I've been working on healing the money wound, the framework for rebuilding confidence, value, and wealth. So I got my revisions in. But we've been working on those things. But we're going to start doing more lives and getting people moving into action. You cannot just consume information right now and not take action. Right now is the time you must start taking action, even before Mars moves into Aries, which it will be soon. But you need to start taking action on yourself. It is so important. Redesigning the systems inside of ourselves, not allowing our default setting to run the show. And that can be social conditioning, cultural conditioning. We often put culture on a pedestal. And as somebody who comes from cultural anthropology, I can say sometimes culture is used to justify things that maybe needed to change a while ago. Like it made sense in the culture 300 years ago, it doesn't make sense in the culture now. Or it isn't actually the result of culture, it's the result of a dominating force, like from colonialization, etc. And so learning to not just deconstruct, but renovate from the inside out. But that's all theory, right? Until you take it into practice. So what can you do this week? This week, One of the biggest things you can do is really get your hands into the clay. I'm not saying tune out the world, but stay lightly apprised. But overconsumption, and I've talked about this since last year, overconsumption is going to disable you from taking any meaningful action. So things you can do to shake the despair, or the lethargy that happens, the devitalization that happens from being overinformed and underactive is clean the house. That's why I always say go wash dishes, get your hands in the water, do the laundry, tidy the space, reorganize, assess the pantry, take care of your immediate needs. I was talking with my assistant, Alicia, and I was like, I was trying to decide how I was going to address things on the podcast. And I was like, sometimes we bounce ideas. And she was like, I was really focused on things in the outer world, especially in 2024, because I became informed in a way I hadn't been before. And I was wondering if it made me selfish when I started pulling things back inside when I was listening to you and I was coming to center, and I felt selfish for a minute. I said, but it's never selfish to take care of yourself. Hurting yourself through denying yourself your needs being met, martyring yourself for a cause that isn't actually yours, even if it's humanitarian, that is not solving the problem. That's joining in the problem. That's joining in the suffering, which does not elevate people out of it. So when you take care of you, one, you give yourself more resources to help other people. Okay. When you take care of you and your immediate environment, you are less at risk of panic, which can hurt other people around. Like, think of the people who are unthinking and run and grab every loaf of bread and hoard resources. Those people are the weakest link. They think they're being strong by taking care of their families. That's not self-maintenance, that's greed. Okay, so like in healing the money wound, I explain money wound isn't just from being poor. The billionaires have a gaping hole. Okay, a gaping hole. They do not know how to be satisfied. All right. If you can't find satisfaction, you're injured. Okay. You have a gaping wound, and that wound hurts other people. So, taking care of ourselves, making sure we have as much sleep as we can get. The energy has been very frenetic, and there's been a lot of sleep disruption because we're dealing with a lot of uncertainty. And there's no way of knowing. You can be an astrologer, a psychic, a medium, and have an idea of the themes. You can even get some details, but you will never know exactly how it plays out. Because 30 years ago, if you would have told me some of the dumbass stuff that's happening today by so-called leaders, I would have been like, no way, they're not going to be that dumb. I know they're going to be privileged and competent, but it won't be that incompetent. Nope, here we are. Here we are. Look at where we're at. I can obsess over that because I don't understand that level of stupidity. And that's not going to do me any good. I can't serve you from that space, right? So making sure adequate sleep, adequate nutrition, taking your supplements and your vitamins. We may need more supplements and vitamins. If you can stock up on those, I know they can be expensive, but making sure you stock up on those is really important. And I can't tell you which ones to take because I don't know you, but that's something you talk to your doctor or your pharmacist about. Okay. But in my case, I was trying to figure out what was going on with my tendons. Yes, I overused them. I know exactly what I did. Okay. It wasn't my finest moment. And I went to do some research because I was getting concerned because it was harder and harder to use my hands. In my research, I saw that there were nutritional supports for connective tissue. And I decided to look because as I was reading through a list of the supplements, so vitamins and minerals and lipids, I went and I looked and I had a supplement that I wasn't taking regularly that I had bought to support my eyeballs. And I took it a little bit, didn't really notice anything, because it's not going to fix my vision. My vision is mechanical. It's a mechanical issue. All those people say, take lutein, Laurie, it'll fix your eyesight. No, it won't. It'll just give my eyes better health so my retina stays healthier, but it's not going to improve my vision, I promise. So I go to those things skeptically. Notice that was a narrative that stopped me from supporting my body. Like nothing's going to fix my eyeballs. Well, no, it's not fixing my vision, but it did improve my eye health because in taking that, it not only has helped the tendons in my thumbs from over misuse, it also is supporting the connective tissue around my eyes. And my eyes aren't as tired. Go figure. And so making sure, and it's not just lutein, it's a whole thing. But I'm very, very tickled about that. And so making sure we're supporting ourselves physically, emotionally. If you have a therapist, it's a good time to go to a therapist. If you don't have a therapist, looking for resources like my podcast, Matilda's podcast, Tracy St. Croix's podcast. We all talk about things that help elevate you, give you tools to keep moving. It is a very good idea to look at side hustles and side gigs. We just did your natural income path. That was a wonderful workshop. Everybody got the workbook. And then we're doing the gardening class. And then I'll be doing some astrology classes in April. And Matilda and I have an event we're setting up for May where we'll cover you through the summer months so that you are as apprised as what we can give you on navigating both the weather, world events, how to be prepared, etc. Those are all things that we're trying to do. I'm going to teach some astrology classes. I think I'm just going to do a couple workshops because I keep getting similar questions. And if you want to learn beginning astrology and you've never done anything outside of, maybe watching some videos about the signs, like your sun sign, if that's all you know, then go hit my YouTube channel, Beginning Astrology Tutorial Playlist. Astrology, real astrology, to be an astrologer takes time and practice. That's why I spend a lot of my time translating the astrology into practical everyday tools for you to use. But yeah, so in the Patreon podcast, I'll go over different ways you express creativity based on your natal chart. I'll be talking about what I expect to be up on deck this week, as well as what's in the headlines, that segment. If you see my videos on TikTok and you're relatively new to me, those little clips are actually part of a much longer video where I go through what I expect to see in the headlines. For everybody wanting good news, guess what? You're it, all right? But politically, it's very unstable right now, and it's going to continue to be. So what do? You take care of you. You take care of your energy levels. You take care of your physical health. Try to pull your focus back in as much as possible and to what you need to do in the immediate moment. As the member of the Awake Space said, they have kids that depend on them. That's right. Focus on them. Do fun things. Live for the giggles. Okay. Live for the giggles. It's so important. Put on some music when you clean the house and everybody dance around. My mom used to do that when I was a kid. It's an intense week. But the more you can approach it creatively, the better that can be. And creativity takes many, many forms. Let me know what you decide to do and how it helps you shift your personal energy by dropping a comment anywhere this podcast allows for comments. I know the videos are now up on YouTube because I changed my podcasting host. Spotify no longer has the videos. Can't do anything about that. You can check them out on the YouTube channel. And I am going to change up how I'm going to link the YouTube into the Patreon from now on because it's there's reasons. It's technical, but we're going to do it that way. But you can watch it. This is a free podcast. Thanks to the members of the Awake Space, which is proving out that when community comes together, resources are more easily shared. So if you want to know more about how to navigate the week, you can head over to Patreon and join us as a supporting member. I'm Laurie Rivers, and I hope you have a good week, regardless of circumstances. And remember, fear is a misuse of imagination.